Well, consumer economist Tendani Mantshimuli from Liberty joins me now to further explore the impact of all of these price hikes on consumers. Tendani, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, so up until now, I mean, we've heard warnings of price hikes and the tough times for consumers. But when you look at the numbers, the recent numbers over the days, it's now become a harsh reality. These prices are up and they're here now, aren't they?
And you know that when we look at inflation, we always look at historical figures. So people have already seen price increases on the supermarket shelves. The price of red meat, you talked about the price of chicken, all poultry, and so on. These things have been increasing steadily since the end of last year. As the drought intensified, as grain became more expensive, the grain that is fed to chicken, which is input costs to poultry farmers and some livestock farmers, put the prices of those end products higher. So consumers have been paying higher prices for those and other fresh produce in the supermarket shelf. However, what you mentioned earlier, those are necessities. You talked about electricity hikes. You talked about petrol price increases due to the increase in fuel levy. We're actually fortunate because despite the fluctuations in the value of the rand, the oil price itself is still cushioning us from higher inflation and higher petrol prices in this country. So those are things that are going to put real pressure on the consumer. Now, if you look at the economic outlook going forward, we're talking about at least Treasury put out growth as 0.9% for 2016, which I think is very optimistic. This is happening alongside inflation, which is going to go higher because one, the weakness of the rand, two, the drought, which you see is going to push food prices higher. That's a very difficult position to be at because while you're going to pay higher food prices and higher everything, you're not going to expect a higher income as well because companies are just not going to be able to afford to do that. Their income streams are going to be under pressure. So consumers are really going to be in a difficult bind.
You speak about the 0.9% growth being optimistic.
I think so.
What will the Reserve Bank do in the midst of all of this? I mean, do they raise interest rates at a growth level of this sort?
So the bank, if you recall the statement from the governor last time, while growth, they keep an eye on growth, their primary mandate is inflation. What is going to hurt the men on the street more? If you continue to see inflation increase unchecked, at the end of the day is the person who is the poorest of the poor who's going to bear the brunt of the higher food prices, the higher transport costs. Interest rate increases, if you think about it, Devin, don't really put that much pressure, immediate pressure on the poorest of the poor because they don't have a bond like you and I. They don't have a loan on car prices. Not that it doesn't hurt them at the end, but immediately, if inflation just going to continue unchecked, that's going to be a problem. However, this time around, inflation is not demand driven. Inflation is from the supply side, so that's a difficult position for the bank to be at. But at the end of the day, to see for them is to look at what is the secondary round impact on that. Are we seeing it passing through to that because that becomes generalized and that is a problem. So I think for the bank it's a balancing act. Do you let it go unchecked or use smaller incremental changes like they did last time?
South Africans have also become increasingly dependent on credit. We heard the Nedbank CEO Mike Brown there saying that the impairments have had somewhat of a good showing last year. But you just look at the situation that you've described for the coming year. This credit dependence, that's a bit of a shocker, isn't it? I mean, that's a worrisome scenario.
So all these things that we've talked about now put pressure on your disposable income. But those who still can afford credit are using their credit to finance current consumption. Ideally, you shouldn't be using your credit card to buy groceries, to pay school fees. You should be using your disposable income. That becomes something that comes into increasing pressure as you use that to finance other things. Having said that, it's worrying for me as well that South Africans do not save. We don't have a saving culture like other emerging markets who are at the same level of us. So that is a worrying concern because you rely on credit, you don't have reserves saved to back you up when you have a crisis like this.
The Treasury has been making a persistent point about that, but that's where we leave it. Consumer economist Tendani Mantshimuli from Liberty, thanks indeed for coming in.
Thank you.